For the third year and counting, Richard Skipper has been celebrating the artists you love. Richard Skipper is all about celebrating life, art, and his guest body of work. Please join us while he showcases these diverse and talented individuals. Here's Richard Skipper.
Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. Who or what are you celebrating tonight? I'm celebrating the fact that I'm perpendicular. I'm getting better and better every day. So I want to thank you all for the cards. Yesterday I received a package from Katz's Delicatessen. I mean, with chicken matzo ball soup and everything. It was just incredible. So thank you all for the phone calls and the cards and everything. But I am getting better each and every day. Today is National Take Your Teddy Bear to Work Day. So I have my little teddy bear here on my desk. It's a Skipper teddy bear that somebody actually had created for me and sent to me. So that was a lot of fun. But tonight, we have everything because we have Celia Berk on the show. And for those of you who already are familiar with her work, you already know that she is one of the greatest singers in Cabaret today. And I'll say that, she's gonna nod in the background, I'm sure. But I am a huge fan of hers. And I have been a fan of hers since the first time I would see her performing with Sarah Rice and Carol Demas and their troupe. And then I saw her at the Iguana before she made this huge, incredible splash on the New York City cabaret scene. But she made a big splash and she continues to make us a big splash. Today I was going through some old correspondence and everything, and I did an interview with her in 2015. And I can't believe that the time has just gone by. But enough about all that. She's here tonight, and I am thrilled. Celia, I am so thrilled that you were here tonight, and congratulations on this great, I'm not going to call it a CD, I'm going to call it an album.
An album. That's all, what do you call this music anymore? It's hard to know.
It is so incredible. I've been listening to you on a mix all day. I've got all of your CDs on my device. I won't say her name because she will go off. Yes, they're all there. So I listen to you all day long. But and we're going to talk about this particular CD in a moment. Beyond the obvious, the fact that we are celebrating this new CD tonight, who or what are you celebrating today?
Well, I'm celebrating that I'm perpendicular as well. And I think you should just clarify your opening statement and make sure everybody understands it's because you had COVID.
And still in it. I'm still.
Yeah, and are still in it. And I've just come out of it. And I am so annoyed to have gotten caught this late in the game because I'm the one walking around with a mask all the time. But I'm certainly celebrating that I feel wonderful and am out and about, and my friends and family are healthy. So that's the most important thing, knock on wood.
Well, let's start with the PSA, a public service announcement. Get boosted, because I have been so careful. I have been incredibly careful. I have not been going to shows. I have not been doing things. I go out and have dinner with a couple of friends last week in their apartment. They just got back from being on a cruise. I'm not saying that that's where I got it, but that's the only logical explanation that I have. Last week, anyone who knows me knows that for 2 years, I've been working on these events celebrating Helen Hayes here in Nyack. I was not able to attend one event after 2 years of work. And we're going to talk about the stops and starts in a career because Melissa Errico just a month ago posted a video that had me in tears. She was in the Midwest ready to do a concert, and it got rained out. And this was something that she had spent a lot of time and effort and money on, and then everything stops. This CD or this album, did you start working on this prior to COVID? And I'm talking about the bigger umbrella of COVID, not your COVID.
Yes. No, definitely. Yeah.
Yes. Or did it come as a result of COVID?
No, it's not as a result of COVID, but I think it colored the ultimate recording. So it started, I want to say, about 4 years ago in a partnership with a wonderful pianist named Sean Gough. And we started working together, and we did various dates. We did the Beach Cafe, we did Birdland Theater, we did the Catano, and started to prepare to record, at which point we invited Tedd Firth to join the creative team. And at that point, I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of the songs were set. But if you had asked me what the album was about before we went into COVID, I would have said, oh, it's about love, about connecting, disconnecting, trying to connect. But by the time I came out of COVID, the COVID lockdown and the depths of the experience, I would change that to say that it's about connecting. It really changed my perception of what it is that we do as human beings. And, you know, I'm an introvert. So I thought, oh, this isn't going to be so hard for me. I don't go out that much either. And I found the lack of connection to be absolutely brutal. And so I would say now that it's about the way that we connect our hearts to each other, or try to, not just romantically. And so it evolved during the COVID lockdown and that phase.
Now, which comes first for you? The idea of an album and the songs that will go into it, or does it come out of the creative process of creating a show? When you started out on this journey with Now That I Have Everything, was your ultimate goal to do an album, or was it to just create a new show for yourself?
Probably neither. It was to step further into the jazz realm. Not that I would ever present myself as a pure play jazz singer, but I wanted to see what that was like. I thought it would challenge me in different ways. I thought it would relax me a little bit because I'm very classically trained, and I wanted to see what would happen, and the jazz chords and the jazz sensibility and what it's like to work with jazz musicians who never play the same thing twice. That's what I was going to do. And the prompt for what started as a show or a set and became the album were 2 songs. One is what became the title track, Now That I Have Everything. But the first song that started the whole thing was a song that's not on the album, but was in the show, called Now It Can Be Told by Irving Berlin. And my friend Debbie Whiting, the daughter of Margaret Whiting, the granddaughter of Richard Whiting, had given me an album of her mother's radio, unproduced radio, things that she had discovered that her mother had recorded on the radio and had never been put out. And one of the songs was her mother singing Now It Can Be Told. And I remember having it on in the background and walking around the apartment and standing in that doorway and listening to that song that I'd never heard. And I thought, now what can be told? And I went, oh, I'm going to find out. I'm going to do a program of songs about this, what was prompted by that song, which is the greatest love affair that's never been told. So it started out as romantic love. And so I set out and started to accumulate songs. And I've always got a running list of things that might show up in a project at some point. And then Debbie came back and there was an email, and it was called Now That I Have Everything. And it said, I've been listening to Mother on the radio and I can hear you sing this song. And it was Now That I Have Everything. And I said, that's the last song. If the prompt is Now It Can Be Told, now I know where we're going, which is the ultimate resolution. Now I have everything. I just need to find the arc of the set and this arc ultimately of the album. So it was really those 2 songs.
Well, let's talk about arcs for a moment, because I mean, first of all, I still love albums. I still have a lot of vinyls, and I love that sound of that crispy sound that you don't hear on a CD, of course. But when I listen to music, and I do have a mix going sometimes, but I also love to just sit back, which is what I did with you, and listen to the entire album in one sitting if possible. Just whether I'm lying in bed listening to it or just sitting back and trying to shut out the rest of the world and listening to it. And unfortunately, people don't listen to music this way anymore. So as you are creating this album, is that arc always uppermost in your thoughts? Or are you thinking, just piecemeal, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, in terms of people can just listen to the music as an entity into itself?
Well, I think there's a difference between an arc and sequencing an album. So we did, in the end, have to figure out how to sequence these songs. And it was the hardest of the 3 albums to sequence. And you still want to sequence it knowing that some people like you and other people who really respect the process and want to hear what the artist intended and how they intended you to hear it, you sequence it. But the arc for me was just the twists and the turns that would ultimately result in, now that I have everything. So what you then call the album is signaling to the listener, no matter whether they shuffle it or listen to it one at a time or throw it into a mix or pick up one song on a playlist or whatever, you want them to know that it's all in service of, I finally have everything and my everything is you. So it was really important that it become the title of the song, of the album, just like the last album was Manhattan Serenade. And you knew that it was an album about Manhattan.
It's very interesting. I watched a documentary the other night on Max Steiner. And
Yes.
Max Steiner truly created the soundtrack of motion pictures in terms of everything. And it was interesting when he was working on a film, which I did not realize until I watched the documentary the other night. He did not want to read a script. He did not want to have any bearing. Once he had an outline of what the show was about or the movie, then he was able to put those motifs. And he created, there was a phrase called Mickey Mousing, which was basically, in Disney cartoons, each of the characters had their own sound, their own motif. And so he, of course, did that. The most famous, of course, being Gone with the Wind, where everyone has their own theme, which
That's
I
right.
love.
And I actually, as a teenager, went out and bought the album of the music from Gone with the Wind. And it was the first time I isolated the sound of the music in a movie. And as you said, everybody has their theme. Mammy has a theme, Pitty Pat has a theme, Scarlett has a theme, and just the sweep of it. And you absolutely could hear what was going on in that movie, and you did not need the dialogue to know that. And when I'm working on an album, the engineer will give me some kind of a rough mix of just the musicians, so before I go in to do the vocals. And I learned so much from what the musicians have done, what they think is going on in that song. And it ultimately became Tedd Firth at the piano. And when you isolate Tedd, and just listen to what he's doing without any of my scratch vocals, it's just extraordinary. And it's like these flashes of, oh, I can go in and out and around that, but look what he's anchored here, or look what he's done at the beginning that helps your ear acclimate to what that first phrase is going to be that I sang. So I find all of that absolutely fascinating.
I want to give a nod to K.T. Sullivan, because when I first started in this business, she said, have at least 5 musicians, 5 musical directors who know your show so that you're never at a loss.
Yeah.
And when I was performing as Carol Channing in the dark ages, and I was touring all over the country, a lot of times when you got booked, you did not have the option of, because of budgets and everything, to bring your musicians with you. I would show up and those musicians would be in place. I had all my music in a file so that they could go in and download the music before I would arrive there. And each time I would show up, I would always say, I know what I'm doing. Bring your own style to the show. And that way it makes it interesting for me. I know that some singers are very rigid in terms of how something has to sound and be. But I found that flexibility was really it was growth material for me. And I loved doing it. Let's go there for a moment in terms of putting your team together of musicians, because you've worked with so many incredible people in this business, and they've worked with you.
Yeah, and I've just been so fortunate. I mean, my first 2 albums, the music director and the co-producer was Alex Rybeck, and you can't set out into recording in the cabaret world any better than with a Sherpa like Alex Rybeck, and the director of the 2 shows that were based on the album was Jeff Horner. You can't do any better. I felt like they poured a lifetime of experience into me, and it was not an easy decision to then say, I want to step into the jazz world a little bit and see where that takes me. And that took me to other collaborators. It's terrifying. It really is. And you get used to hearing certain things on your rehearsal track. I just did the album live at the National Arts Club a couple of weeks ago, and we had the original musicians there, and the engineer had given me the final tracks without vocals so that I could rehearse, and we didn't rehearse again with the musicians until that morning. And I just had to make up my mind that wherever they went, it was not going to sound like it did on the recording, because they're jazz musicians. Mm-hmm. And to your point, I know what I'm doing, and they are going to do whatever they're doing, and hopefully it brings out something fresh and exciting.
And it does.
And it does. And so now that I've gotten over that hump, I don't think I'll ever be quite so frightened by it anymore. And we did and I know you like it, the bass of Right as the Rain with Jay Lenhart, and it was fantastic. But it was nothing like what we had done in the studio. It ended up that it wasn't Jay on the recording, but regardless, it was so alive, because when you're doing something, the way you have to listen and the way they have to listen to me, you go like that. And it was really thrilling.
Well, we are going to give away an autographed copy of your CD tonight. And there it is. And the word that I chose for today is drive. Because I've looked at the trajectory of your career, and from where I stand, you do seem to have an intense drive for perfection, for the work that you do, for the way that you are presented, and the way, and I would even go to say the way that you are perceived in this business. I think that you are really in control of your brand, who you are as an artist, and what you bring to the table. I want to ask you, where did that drive first originate for you? And I know that you're classically trained, and we're going to get to the cabaret world in a moment. Yeah. But how did that all begin for you?
The irony is, when I set out to be a performer 30 years ago and decided I couldn't live that life, I just wasn't made for it. I went off and I had a corporate career, and the corporate career I had was in marketing communications in the world's largest public relations firm, and then advertising agencies. I spent 30 years immersed in branding and messaging. So it's not like I'm being cynical about it. It's like, I don't know any other way to do that. I spent all those years watching the greatest communicators in the world at work, and I just picked up certain things from them.
When you were immersed in that world, were you delving into the world of cabaret at all? Were you going to see shows?
Not cabaret, of course, because I love music and I love theater. I said that I gave everything up, and I really believed that I had, and I didn't notice that I hadn't actually stopped taking voice lessons every week. So there was something in the back of my mind that was keeping the engine humming. And so when I went back to it, I went, oh, look at that. Actually, that was the part of it I never gave up. All that time I thought I'm an actor. But look at that. The thing that I couldn't bear to let go of was actually the music. So it was there. And so if you ask anybody who was with me during that 30-year corporate career, they would go, oh yeah, she would go off once a week to a voice lesson. She'd bolt out of here at the end of the day once a week, and you'd see music in her bag, whether it was an opera score or a song or whatever, but she'd never let us hear what she was doing. So
was that just for the sheer exhilaration of keeping your voice intact and singing, or in the back of your mind was the fact that I'm always going to have that career at some point?
No, in a million years, if anybody had told me that I would go back to it or that I would have any kind of success with it at this phase of my, I would tell them it's not possible. It really is something more elemental than that. Wow. I have to sing. I have to sing.
Now, I asked, as I do with many of our guests, for a young photograph of you.
My mother will be enjoying this.
No, I love this photo.
The hair.
I love the bangs.
Look at the bangs. Yes.
The barrettes.
Yes.
And I remember, going to school and girls looking like this in school, and I mean, it's just so adorable.
I remember my mother setting me up for this. Then there are other pictures where it looks like there was a bowl on my head and then she cut around. And then I saw Debbie Whiting posted something on Facebook and I went, oh my gosh, Margaret cut her hair the same way. So we reached out to my mother and I said, what? Did they just teach every mother in America to just drop this bowl on your daughter's head and cut around it?
Moms and dads did what they need to do to get us through.
Yes.
But I want to talk about this little girl. And I think this is the album cover for your next album. I really do. So did you?
Harp. Yeah.
I know that the music was always a part of you and you are classically trained. But did you grow up in a household of music?
Yes, absolutely. My grandmother was a wonderful pianist, and I have her 1926 Steinway in my living room. This is not my living room, and it's my most treasured possession. Her sister was an opera singer, a mezzo-soprano, and I think you've seen me sing the song Yiddish Nightingale, and I always talk about my grandmother's sister, Hadassah, Aunt Dessa. So that's on that end of the family tree. There were musicians. On the other end of the family tree was my father, who really could not keep a tune, but absolutely adored what I now know to be the Great American Songbook. He gave me the Great American Songbook, and it started with him singing to me all of Al Jolson. He just adored Al Jolson. So in my new Cabaret show, the first song is April Showers. The first anecdote is about Jolson and is about my father. So it was coming from both ends. And my mother managed to round out my understanding of opera and musical comedy. And every birthday was a Broadway show, which for me was just heaven. I lived on Long Island and we all went in and saw a Broadway show every year. It was like, and there was music playing in my house all the time.
Do you recall the first cabaret show that you ever saw?
Oh, how interesting. I'll tell you, I remember being in the room. I can't tell you much more than that. When I was slightly younger than the girl in that picture, we went to Florida and Judy Garland was playing at the hotel. And I remember being in the room. I remember that it was a tiered room. And I remember it had an electricity in the room and a tension in the room. I don't remember her. I can't hear her voice, but I remember being in that room. And so that kind of thing that a great singer can create, the sense of anticipation and the sense of connection and sparks and electricity. I remember that. My father, when I was a teenager, worked at Madison Square Garden, and I got to see Sinatra at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And that's not a nightclub, but I have to tell you, they were screaming. All the Bobby Soxers were, of a certain age at that point. And he told them to be quiet. He invited everyone in Madison Square Garden to sit next to him on a bar stool while he told us a story. And then he sang Angel Eyes. And to this day, I can remember what he did in that room. And I saw Streisand at Madison Square Garden also. And that was not, it was thrilling, and she sounded thrilling. But that intimacy that he did between himself, the respect he had for the music, and how he communicated to that audience, I will never, ever forget that. And so
we had tickets to see Frank Sinatra and Shirley MacLaine at Radio City Music Hall. And I was so thrilled and so excited. And the morning of the concert, I'm listening to WNEW 1130 AM radio, if you remember that. I'm listening, and they announced that he has pneumonia and that the show was being postponed. He never performed again. And I never got the chance to see him live. But I've heard stories that even at the end of his life, we know this, the legendary stories of Mabel Mercer,
right,
where she basically did not have the ability to sing a song the way that she did in her early career, but she could sit on a chair.
parlando and speak.
I'll tell you who I saw do that, and that was Peggy Lee. I saw her at the ballroom, and this was towards the end of her life. She came out, sat in a director's chair, and as she made her way, like holding onto the piano and everything to get there, she sat down and started to sing, I won't dance, don't ask me. And I still remember so vividly that moment, because she just took the audience by surprise, because she could barely make her way to the chair. I mean, it looked like. And then she sat down, and it was just amazing. And there are certain entertainers, I prefer entertainers rather than performers, for the greats that I love. And I put you in that category, Celia. I truly do.
Thank you.
But in those, I know that you early on knew that you had this gift and that you wanted to pursue a career, but you also said early on that you knew that that was not the lifestyle for you.
It turned out I was not built for being a starving artist. And I got a national commercial. And I remember walking out at like midnight. We had been shooting all day. And I went, oh my God, tomorrow I have to start all over again and look for another job. And if I get a job that takes me out of town, if I get a show and it's a tour, what am I going to do with my apartment? And I thought, this is fakakta.
Was it like a light bulb that went off at that moment?
No, I so wanted to do this that I never actually said that I quit. What I said was, I need to take a break for a year. And so I never did anything other than that. And so that's why then it just kept going and going and going. And I started going up the corporate ladder, but I could never tell myself that I had quit. And I always, when I would have a disappointment on the corporate side, I would go, that's nothing. That didn't break my heart. Being a performer, not performing, that broke my heart.
Did you think of yourself as quitting or taking a break?
I told myself I was taking a break, and I never went further than that in my head. So now fast forward to about 10 years ago, and I walk through the door of Cabaret, which was the only door, honestly, that was open to me. But then I got up one morning and I said, I wonder what happened to my equity card and my SAG card. I wonder if I gave them back. I knew I wasn't paying, but I didn't know if I quit the union. What did I do? So I called I called SAG and I called Equity, and they said, no, you suspended them and you can have them back, but it'll cost you a lot of money. And I said, how much money? And they said something like, well, you'll have to pay like a $75 return fee and then the next dues. And I got my SAG card back, and that was fine. And I went to Equity, and I paid it, walked into Equity. I used to be in Equity all the time. I used to go to all those auditions and everything. I walked out with my card. There was a bench outside of Equity. I sat down and I cried like a baby to have it back. And I went, all right, this is a clue about something. You wanted this back. What are you going to do with it? What you've got in your hand, metaphorically. So I was shocked. I just sat there.
You know, I mean, I've lived here in Rockland County for now 33 years almost. And I know that if I had stayed in Manhattan, because I was that kid at the time that used to get up and go to the cattle calls and sign up.
Yes, at 6 o'clock in the morning, you had to sign it up. Oh my God.
And, you know, bleary-eyed and drinking bad coffee from the coffee shop on the corner. Chock full of nuts was on the corner. That's how far back it was. And, you know, and it was just such, you know, it was a different world. But when I moved out here and then the world of cabaret started happening for me and I started getting booked around the country, it was a whole different world for me. And I have never stopped paying my Equity dues. My new bill just arrived 2 days ago.
Yeah, I just got mine. Yeah.
Yes. And the thing is that they always arrive on time. But I've never stopped paying the dues. But when I send that money in, I feel like I'm a part of this community. I'm a part of this world. And for my $1.25 in pension that I probably have earned. But it's, yeah, and now I'm writing a new show, which I'm debuting in Washington in March. I am starting to think about getting back on the boards again. And there's a lot that scares me because I'm older. And but COVID stopped everything for me. And that's why I do what I do now, because I stopped being on stage and I desperately miss it. I went to see a show a couple of weeks ago and Beth Fowler said that she couldn't stop watching me in the audience because my face was lit up. But I love entertainers. I love being in the audience and watching someone create that magic on stage. And it's not jealousy. I mean, I have this desire to be up there with them, but I absolutely get this thrill from being in the audience and being in the audience with fellow artists. And you know what that is, and that is truly what the world of cabaret has become. But as you are starting to get those urges to come back, how did you make that initial change?
Well, you mentioned Sarah Rice, and we shared the same voice teacher. And I had that voice teacher for 20-something years. And periodically she would say, are you ever going to do anything with this? And I said, no. And she would go, okay. And she'd wait 5 years and she'd ask again. But one day I had said to her, I think I want to do something with this. And she went, oh, thank God. She really was holding on. I did some work with Alex Rybeck, and we went into a studio and made a demo, which is great because I would never have had the courage to stand in front of anybody and sing. And so I walked out with a demo and I took it back to my voice teacher and we were listening to it. And the next student to arrive was Sarah Rice. And she said, oh, you need to sing with us. I have this group that sings upstate once a month, and there are just enough people in the audience to get your adrenaline going. You need to come. And so I said, okay. And that's how I started performing again, was doing that one or two songs once a month. Plus
how having long did you do that before you got the courage to step on a cabaret stage? The first time I saw you was at the Iguana.
Right. And that's it. There's a direct line to that because one of the other singers in the group was a wonderful person named Rich Flanders. And he said to me, would you like to sing a duet? And he handed me a song. And I said, okay. And then I took him with me to Alex. He knew Alex. And I'm pretty sure he knew Alex at that point. And we started working up a show. I would never, ever have had the courage to do something on my own at that point. And Alex took us to the Iguana, where you and Dana were doing an open mic. And I will always say that was my first experience getting up, and I thought I was going to die in New York. And you said to me afterwards, "You are always welcome here. Come back anytime." And I've never forgotten that the first person who I encountered was so welcoming to me. And that's really what the cabaret world has been, is this welcoming door that was ajar if I wanted to go through it.
You and Rich, I mean, your voices blended so beautifully together. And I mean, and I remember I went out to, I don't remember, it was a church, I think.
They were both churches. There was
in New Jersey.
Woodsboro and then Blooming Grove.
Blooming Grove, that's, yes. Yeah. And, but your voices blended so well together, and you worked together for quite some time.
We ended up, that was my show at Don't Tell Mama. You know, everybody who starts in cabaret in New York goes to Don't Tell Mama. Yes. So that was with Rich, and we went into the studio and we recorded 3 songs. Then we went back in and did a single. So if it wasn't for Rich and if it wasn't for Sarah, I'd still be hiding under my desk, I think.
But I mean, how did the audience begin to grow for you? And that this was, had Facebook even come along at that point? I don't know.
Facebook was along, and I use it very carefully. So I know it can be very dangerous. I know social media can be very unhealthy. I know it makes some people very unhappy because they don't understand that everybody is choosing to present a curated view of themselves. You know, it's not what their life is really like. But for me, it was an opportunity to introduce myself and stay connected to various people. And when I did my first album, I went and I hired someone to do publicity with me. Deliberately, it was somebody younger who taught me the ropes of social media, because that's where it's going. And so you can't fight it. And it's only now that I've started posting about the music on LinkedIn. It took me years to connect the corporate and the music together. That was like the last step that I just wasn't ready to do.
Well, you beat me to my next question. I mean, you have this incredible background in the corporate world. When did you begin to merge the two in terms of promoting yourself? And as I said earlier, you seem to have a very strong sense of your brand, what you bring to the table, and it's worked for you very successfully. The quote that I pulled here, and I'm going to put it up here, and one of the best singers I've heard in a long time, and he's right, Rex Reed. You don't get better than that, folks, because he is tough. When did you feel the shift in your career that people were starting to pay attention to you?
You know, I started doing the cabaret and the recording thing, and it went whoosh, and I went, oh my God, if that had happened 30 years ago, I don't know whether I would have had that corporate career, because nothing was working, but I was holding it back. I know I was very ambivalent about the whole thing. And this time I just tried to keep an open mind and keep going. And as I said, when you surround yourself with people who really understand that world and are generous about helping you decode it, and you mentioned KT as well, KT Sullivan, then you suddenly have a platform to try to build something. But it gets harder. It doesn't get easier.
Well, the New York City cabaret world is a very strange world to be a part of, let's face it. And you have had these opportunities with Sarah and with Rick Landers, but have you moved beyond the New York City cabaret scene? Have you started booking yourself out in other major cities?
You know, I haven't. I was just beginning to potentially do that. I had just been asked to do something in Florida, and everything shut down. So I really turned back to the recording again, because it was something that was reasonably within my control during COVID. But it's on the table. I mean, that's a missing piece for me, is that I don't take these things out of town, and I can. But it's an enormous amount of work, as you know. You're everything. You're the producer, and you're not the director, but you are the producer, and you're organizing the musicians and negotiating with the musicians and dealing with the room, and then being responsible for filling the room, and then everything. You're the bank. I've just been very careful about what I bite off, but I'm very aware that that's a missing piece for me.
How much? I know that you are still doing your vocal lessons. You're diligent about that, but when you're not doing a show, and of course COVID notwithstanding or withstanding, whatever, were you going still to open mics and getting the opportunity to try out new material in front of an audience?
I had pretty much stopped doing open mics. They're brutal. They are really brutal, but they were great. So the opportunity to do what Sarah was doing, and then doing the open mics. And I'm sure you remember there was an open mic at the Metropolitan Room on Sunday mornings. And I would go every Sunday morning. It was like going to the guillotine. I was so scared. And that meant that I had to work with lots of different music directors, because there was a different music director every week, and Alex was going to be on the road. He wasn't going to be around on a Sunday morning. He had just done a gig somewhere in some other location on a Saturday night. So that taught me a lot, and having to get up and do that definitely built some muscles for me. And Salon has been wonderful, and Mark Janis and Tanya Moberly, that's another place where you could go and try things out. So sometimes when I'm in the early stages of something, I'll throw myself back into an open mic, because you have got to find out from an audience whether what you think is working is making any sense. And an audience tells you a lot. Even if they think they're just sitting there like that, you can see when they zone out. You can see when you've really got them. You can see if they wince. But all of that got taken away. So the show that I'm doing now, we just did one Friends and Family, and then I was up on the stage in the Beachman, and I everybody come back, because I feel like after by the fifth performance, it definitely is different than the first performance. There's no place to get things up to try them.
Well, this may seem like a silly, simple question that I'm going to ask you, but think about it. What was the scariest part about going into this Sunday morning open mic and getting up in front of an audience? I mean, already you were loved in the cabaret community. People knew.
But this was before I hadn't done my show yet. I was doing this to get ready to do my show, and because my first show was going to be at the Metropolitan Room, I really wanted to feel that stage. Yeah. It was just such an enormous leap. Just an absolutely enormous leap. And Alex had said something to me. He was right, but it scared the crap out of me. He said, well, you're older and you read older. So when you get up on a stage, an audience is going to expect you to have as much performing experience as you do life experience. So they're not going to give you a pass like they would a kid. And that's all. That was it. From that point on, I was gone. But he was right.
What a great thing for him to say to you, though.
Yeah, it was. No, he was absolutely right. It was like, nope, they're not going to give me a pass. So how am I going to do this? And so I just had to work through the fear in various ways.
How do you find your audience now outside the cabaret world?
That's partly why I've broken down the boundaries between the social media that's more entertainment focused and the things like LinkedIn. I'm just much more open about it. And when we think of promotion for things, we don't just think about the obvious kinds of stories and where those stories could run. To help people, you're trying to help people find you. And it's not so easy. It really, really isn't easy. there's a lot of noise in the system and not a lot of support from any of the rooms, not because they're doing something wrong. It's just that everybody only has so much bandwidth. You all have to do your own thing. You have to take care of yourself.
Yes, I have a theory about that, however. I would much rather see 15 quality acts booked in any club than to see 150 acts that are struggling for an audience. And
but great performers will occasionally struggle for an audience.
Yes, I know.
It's happened to everybody, and I've been in some rooms of great performers where it's sparse. There are just nights that are like a perfect storm of everything. Everything is wrong. And you mentioned Melissa Errico, not only the one where she got rained out, she wrote this gorgeous story for the New York Times, very honest about what the whole thing is like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And she talked about being somewhere in the Midwest with Tedd and discovering they had a really small audience because across the street was another theater with a big name. And in a small town, they'd all gone there. And she talked about the fact that she didn't want to go out and do it, and that Tedd made her do it, and that it was the best thing she ever did because she owed it to the people who'd chosen to come and see her that night. But I gave her such props for telling that story. I mean, if you haven't seen that article,
no, it's an amazing article. I know which one you're.
Oh my God!
And, Julie Wilson. I mean, she would go on, and she, with her career behind her, she said there were some nights where she would be lucky if there were 4 people in the audience.
Right.
And that was in the days when they did late shows. So as we wind down today, I've got some random questions for you.
Okay.
And these are just for the fun of it, just to get a sense of you. And the first 3 questions are truly random questions. I haven't even looked at them yet. And the first one is, what's the best thing about the opposite gender?
The best thing about the opposite gender?
Yeah.
That they're the opposite gender.
That they're the opposite gender.
They're the opposite. That they're different.
I love the answer. What a crazy question to pop up. So this is a statement, and I'd like you to repeat the statement after I say it, and then elaborate on it. Okay? And the statement is, I own my truth and speak it freely.
Own my truth and speak it freely, and I try not to hurt anybody in the process.
Wonderful. That's great. Well, you certainly own your truth on stage. So that fear that you went through,
well, it's never going to go away. It's just kind of managed now. Yeah.
So I pulled this card. It's called Look at the Bridge. You can see this. And it says, if you're too shy to maintain eye contact, now that we're talking about this, look at the bridge of a person's nose. The other person can't tell the difference and you feel less uncomfortable. With the work that you do in the world of cabaret, what are those moments like when you're negotiating? For you, I mean, obviously you've got this incredible corporate background, and I'm sure that you bring some of that to the table. But I'm talking about in terms of putting your team together, choosing your material, asserting yourself, and living your truth, so to speak.
Right. So what's the question?
So the question is your negotiating skills in terms of dealing with other people to assert your truth in this business.
I mean, I'm negotiating with people all the time. I'm trying to understand, because there isn't a rule book for this whole world. I try to understand what people do, whether it's fair, what it feels like on the other side, whether we're making an investment in each other in some way. And that works both ways. And if I get stuck, I really do try to sit on the other side of the table mentally and go, why are we all tangled here? What did I do badly that I can do better? And own it. But sometimes it's just not, it's not going to work for whatever reason. But I try to be fair. I want everybody to feel that they're being treated with respect.
That's wonderful. What do you think is the clearest definition for you of what success means in this business?
What success you mean in cabaret or in music?
When it comes to your music, cabaret,
Yeah,
any
yeah.
of the topics that we've discussed this evening, your career, what success means to you?
That I am doing it on my own terms, that I'm proud of it, that it's not the same thing over and over again, that I'm constantly challenging myself. So it's okay if something doesn't go right away, or I'm always sure it can be done better, but that I'm always trying to do it better, and that the people that I respect what I do. And nothing gives me more pleasure than when somebody tells me that they listened to something and it evoked something in them, that they got something from it, whether it was a memory or they connected to it or it just gave them pleasure. That I just think that's thrilling.
That's wonderful. What is the biggest injustice that you feel that you have endured in your career, or have you? And if so, without giving away any names or anything, I'm asking this question for a specific reason. And what got you through it?
I don't think I've encountered injustice. I've encountered frustration, but I think it's the same frustration that everybody has. The cabaret world is it's hard. It's hard work. But that's the trade-off of it also being the open door that welcomes everybody. I mean, I don't think you can have one without the other.
Great.
So, yeah.
What is do you believe in manifestation? And if so, do you feel that you are manifesting the career that you have envisioned?
You know, I never did. And when I work with Rich Flanders, he would say things and I'd go, what? And he'd say, I'm just putting it out there in the universe. And then I would see that when he put stuff out in the universe, he made it happen. So I said, you know what? I'm going to try that. So I like throw things out to see what will happen. Because first and foremost, I really consider myself an actor who sings, not a singer who acts, because that's my background. And to me, every song is a one-act play. So I just started putting out there, I would like to do some acting. And damned if I didn't get two opportunities this year. And I thought, oh my God, Rich's thing really works. I just put it out there.
Thank you, Rich Flanders. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have to think about what I want to put out there next. My God.
Well, I love that. Are you a minimalist or a collector?
I'm a collector. Behind that door is so much junk. It's unbelievable.
What turned out to be the most useful course that has helped you in your current career?
Most useful course, probably finance for non-financial managers. Because I remember early on when I was talking to Alex and to Jeff, and I went, now you didn't understand that the economics of this aren't working, right? You do understand all the money's going out from the performer and only so much money is coming back. And I swear it's because I took that seminar, I think it was the University of Michigan, for a week, and finally cracked the code on understanding finance. And I went, okay, I understand the model now.
Figure it out. Now, this is an interesting, bizarre question I'm going to ask you. I'm warning you. What true crime have you ever been most tempted to commit?
Oh, murder. I mean, I think we've all wanted to murder somebody.
Don't say who. Excuse me, now I'm going to get caught up. What boundaries do you create around the people in your career?
I think there are different tiers of relationships, and I think that there are people who you have working relationships with, and I think there are working relationships that are also very important to you personally. And so you have to differentiate between those, and you have to protect them in different ways because of the kinds of relationships that they are.
Wow, great answer. When you were a child, did you fit the mold of a perfect child?
It depends on who you ask.
I will go back and look at this gorgeous picture here. I think this is a perfect child.
I don't think I was a perfect child, but I wasn't. I don't think I was a nightmare.
Wow. And this is going to be my last question. And remember, if you put in #drive, you will have a chance to win Celia Berk's CD, which is phenomenal. One of my favorite songs is on this CD, and that's Love from Ziegfeld Follies. I love that song. I love what Lena Horne did with it. I love what Judy Garland did with it. But Celia, you made it your own.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is the most surprising action that you feel that you've ever taken in your career beyond anything that we've discussed this evening?
Oh, I think just going back to it after 30 years, I'm still shocked. And I'm still shocked by the reception that I got. Every time I get a positive review, I'm still shocked. When this new show, which by the way comes back on October 23rd to the Laurie Beachman at 4 p.m. But when we opened in February, all they told me was that I had made my minimum. And when I came out, it was wall to wall people who I so admire. And they had all come out. I think everybody said, we got to go see a show. We can't take it anymore. We're so tired of being locked up. But for every step I took, I saw somebody else who I had no idea they were going to be there, and that they all came that first night. I will never forget that. I still replay that in my mind's eye. Will be forever shocked by that.
Well, congratulations, and we're going to do this giveaway. I thank you all for being here tonight. I love you, and I hope you've had as much fun as I've had tonight.
I did. It's never.
Look,
Marianne
Lapento. I don't know if she has the CD or not.
I don't know. She'll tell me. She knows how to get to me.
Yes. If you already have the CD, please take it and give it to someone else. Will Nunziata is here. And Will Nunziata is going to be here on the show on the 25th, I think it is.
Now he has an interesting career that's going in all kinds of interesting directions, including directing now. So
Marianne says she doesn't have it, so she's going to.
Excellent. All right, Marianne,
I'm glad you don't have it. So I'm going to say my final comments for tonight. Then I'm going to turn it over to you and give you the final word. Anything you want to say about anything that we talked about tonight that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any final message that you want to leave everyone with tonight. I want to thank you all for being here. Like I said, and this is not just lip service, I have been a fan of Celia since the first time I saw her on stage, and that has never dissipated. This CD is incredible. I end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. What I'd like you all to do, if you are able to do this, is to order 2 copies of this CD. And all of the information, by the way, is going to be on my YouTube channel. All the links, how to get in touch with Celia on her various social media platforms, everything's right there. So if you're able to do it, order 2 copies of this CD. Keep one for yourself and send one to the first name that pops up on your friends list tonight. And let them know about this show, let them know about the work that Celia is doing, and her next upcoming show, which is going to be at the Laurie Beachman on the 23rd.
Sunday, October 23rd. At
Sunday, October 23rd. So if you're able to be in New York and see her, go and see the show. Drive. She exemplifies it to me in terms of her dedication to her craft, her audiences, which are very important in this business. It's not just about getting up on stage and just singing songs. There's so much that goes into it. And I love the fact that she respects her audiences and they respect her in return. Again, if you enjoyed tonight's show, and I hope you did, please leave a comment on YouTube after tonight's show. Let us know what you think of the show. Tell your friends about the show. Advertising is great, but word of mouth is even better. So please go out and talk about the show. Leave a comment on your favorite social media platform and tag both of us. And that will let other people know about the show as well. I always, and I would like everyone to reach out with a phone call tonight to the first person that pops up on your friends list. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. Celia, I want you to do the same thing. Go to your friends list, and the first name that you see, reach out with a phone call and let that person know what they mean to you. Yesterday, Angela Lansbury passed away, but I think about what an amazing career. And I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and I said, how wonderful that we had her in our lifetime, because there'll be babies that will be born today and beyond who didn't have her in their lifetime. And lo and behold, I'm watching Stephanie Rule on MSNBC last night, and she said the same exact thing. I couldn't believe it. It was like the synchronicity of that. So how lucky are we that all of us are in this moment right now? So spread that love around. As I say, reach out to that first person. My dear friend Sean Moniger says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to go out in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. Yeah. So Celia, I'm going to leave the screen. You got the final word. And again, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you for all that you do. I would just say, I hope that everybody enjoys the album. On my website, celiaberk.com, there's a whole section called recordings. And in each section, there are credits. This album has liner notes by Will Friedwald, which was a great honor. And the album is done in the style of the Nat King Cole Trio. And Will wrote the definitive book about Nat King Cole. And there are song notes. I also hope that if you haven't come to see the show, it was directed by Mark Nadler, which you can imagine was an incredible experience. And it's just me and Tedd Firth on the stage. And it would be a pleasure to have anybody come who hasn't come before. And a big shout out to the Mabel Mercer Foundation for the home that they've given me. And I will be part of the Cabaret convention at Jazz at Lincoln Center, which is back full bore the very last week of the month. And I'm on KT Sullivan's final evening, which is the 28th. So Cabaret is back, and thank God for that. Thank you so much. And thank you to Richard.